Hey friends, tonight we're heading straight into the mud-soaked, back-breaking, gloriously grim reality of being a medieval peasant. That's right, before the castles, before the knights, before anyone bathed more than once a season, there was you. Or rather, there would have been, had you been born a few centuries too early with a strong back, no social mobility, and a 30% chance of surviving past age 12. Charming, isn't it? Now, before we jump into the blissful chaos of farming with wooden tools, and praying the plague skips your village this time, do the usual bedtime ritual like the video. Subscribe if you're into historical misery told softly, and let me know in the comments where in the world you're tuning in from, and what ungodly hour it is. It's always fun seeing who else can't sleep, and ends up here with me in the past. Go ahead and lower those lights. Maybe wrap yourself in a wool blanket. Authenticity, you know? Let a soft fan hum, like the distant wind, through the thatched roofs of an unremarkable English hamlet. Now, you think you'd survive as a medieval peasant? That's sweet. Really, like thinking a turnip counts as dinner. Let's find out. Before you can even think about surviving medieval peasant life, you should know one thing for certain: it's not a vacation. It's not a rustic retreat. It's not a charming Instagram filter called mud and misery. It's hard, grimy, relentless misery served daily with a side of hope you don't die this week. First things first, you don't get to pick this life. You're born into it. Congratulations, you're a peasant. Your parents were peasants, their parents were peasants, and so on, for generations of peasants who thought, hey, maybe one day my kid will be a noble, but no, spoiler alert, they won't. So, let's start at the beginning. Dawn. You wake up on the dirt floor of your one-room hut. Hut might be a generous word, but it's what you've got. It smells like last week's rain mixed with yesterday's cooking fire and a hint of something suspiciously like rotting cabbage. Your bed is a thin layer of straw, probably still damp from the last time it rained and soaked through your roof. You stretch, or try to. Your muscles ache already because yesterday was a marathon of back, breaking labor, chopping wood, hauling water, tilling rocky soil that stubbornly refuses to grow anything edible. Oh yeah, the soil. It's mostly dirt and stones with the occasional miracle weed thrown in. Growing food. More like fighting a daily war with the earth itself. If you're lucky, you have enough seed left over from last year to plant, but chances are your landlord, aka the local lord, aka your owner, took a big chunk of last year's harvest, and what you have left barely feeds your family, never mind storing any for winter. Speaking of your landlord, the lord owns everything: the land, the animals, the crops, and basically your life. You owe him labor, a share of your harvest, and probably a few chickens or pigs if you're feeling generous. Spoiler, you won't, babe. This means you work for free most of the year on his fields, on top of your own. He's the guy with the big house on the hill, fancy clothes, and enough food to last through the winter without breaking a sweat. You're on the bottom of the food chain, praying that rats don't eat what little grain you manage to hide. You trudge out of the hut, barefoot or in leather shoes that are basically glorified cardboard. Your feet are caked with mud, calloused, bruised, and maybe infected if you're unlucky. The walk to the fields takes you past other huts just like yours, rows of misery surrounded by a wooden fence to keep out wild animals, or worse, thieves. Except the fence barely keeps anything out, and the wolves know it. You meet the other peasants, your neighbors, already hard at work, their faces set like stone. Smiling isn't really a thing here, unless you want people to think you're mad or knave. Mostly, you grunt, nod, and get to work. The day is already heating up, and you've got a full roster of chores before noon. You start with the fields, breaking the earth with a wooden plow, pulled by your single cow or ox. The plow is a primitive, crooked stick barely suited to the rocky soil, but it's all you have. Your hands blister from gripping the rough wood. Your back aches from bending over all day. Half the time, the plow hits a buried rock and either breaks or jams. You curse silently because tools don't grow on trees and your landlord certainly isn't going to replace it anytime soon. After plowing, you move on to planting, scattering seeds by hand over the patch of earth you call your own. You try to cover them, but the ground is dry and hard, making it difficult. You pray for rain, But the sky is stubbornly clear. Midday comes. You eat a thin stew, watery broth made from whatever root vegetables survived the last frost. Maybe some stale bread if you're lucky. Meat is a luxury you haven't tasted in months, if ever. The stew tastes like disappointment, but it's fuel, so you choke it down. The sun blazes overhead. There's no shade. Sweat drips from your brow, mixing with the dirt on your face, making your skin itch. The insects swarm. Flies land on your food, your face, your wounds. You swat, but it's useless. They come back. After lunch, it's time to fetch water. You walk to the well, balancing a bucket on your hip. The well is deep, and the bucket is heavy. You lower the bucket, wait for it to fill, then heave it back up, all without spilling most of the water. You make the trip multiple times because your family needs clean water for cooking, drinking, washing, and sometimes, just to soak away the grime you carry like a second skin, you head back. Mud sticking to your legs, feet aching more with every step. Next on the list, repairing the hut. Thatched roofs leak, wooden walls warp, and every little hole invites cold wind or the local vermin inside. You patch holes with mud and straw, hoping it lasts another season. The sun starts to sink behind the hills, but your work isn't done. There's the fire to stoke, the animals to feed, and the children to watch. There's always a risk of illness spreading. One sick child means the whole family might be bedridden with no doctor, no medicine, just prayers and fever dreams. As dusk settles, you sit by the fire with your family, exhausted but unable to rest fully. Hunger gnaws at your belly like a persistent rat. Sleep will come, but only for a few hours because tomorrow is another day of endless labor. You look up at the stars and wonder, fleetingly, what life might be like beyond this endless cycle of dirt, sweat, and pain. Here's the brutal truth. Surviving as a medieval peasant isn't about thriving. It's about barely hanging on. And that's before the war, famine, or plague comes knocking. You think you're done with chores after dark? Think again. The medieval peasant life clock doesn't have a snooze button. It runs on misery, exhaustion, and a pinch of desperation. After your meager meal and a few stolen moments by the fire, it's time to prepare for the night. The cold bites harder after sunset, especially when your clothes are little more than threadbare rags stitched together with hope and sweat. Your one woolen tunic is thin and patchy, soaked through from the day's labor, but it's all you've got. No extra layers, no comfy blankets, just a thin skin of fabric between you and the cold night air. Speaking of the cold, your hut's walls barely keep it out. You can hear the wind whistle through the cracks, sometimes carrying the distant howl of wolves or the shuffling feet of rats. Those rats, by the way, are the unofficial roommates you never asked for. They feast on your leftover scraps, gnaw on the wood, and occasionally, if you're unlucky, spread disease. It's not paranoia if they really are plotting to take over your hut. Now let's talk about the sleeping arrangements. Remember how I said your bed is a pile of straw on the dirt floor? Well, you share that with the rest of your family. Maybe 6 or 7 people squeezed like sardines in a can. There's no personal space unless you count the inch between your elbow and your cousin's snoring face. Sleeping means enduring the symphony of snores, coughs, and the occasional bout of gas. Yes, the peasant life is full of surprises. Privacy is a myth, and modesty a forgotten concept. If your siblings are cranky or scared of the dark, good luck trying to get any rest. The night is as restless as your mind, which races with worries. Worries like, will the harvest fail this year? Or, did I hear the sheriff's men coming to collect extra taxes? Or, is that cough my wife is going to turn into something deadly? The unknowns pile on like unharvested crops, choking your chances of survival. And here's a special bonus: medieval peasants got to deal with diseases most modern folks only read about in history books. The Black Death is the most famous, but that was just the grand finale. Before that, there was smallpox, dysentery, typhus, scurvy, all deadly, all common, and all mostly untreatable. Medical care, forget about it. The local healer is probably some old woman with a stash of herbs and a prayer, and a reputation that swings wildly between miracle worker and witch. Getting sick usually meant 2 things: suffering like a dog and hoping you don't infect your whole family. Now, say you manage to avoid illness for a while. Good for you. But here comes another joy of peasant life: taxes. No, not your usual 21% VAT. Medieval taxes are brutal. The Lord owns the land, so everything you grow, every egg your chicken lays, belongs mostly to him. You get to keep scraps. Sometimes those scraps aren't even enough to feed your family. And then there's the tithe. It's a fancy word for give the church 10% of your harvest or goods. The church is powerful and unforgiving, and if you skip out, you're courting more than bad karma. You risk fines, imprisonment, or worse. But wait, there's more. If the Lord decides he needs more money for his war or a new castle, guess who foots the bill? You do. He'll demand extra labor, goods, or coin. If you can't pay, you might lose your little patch of land altogether, and that means, well, starvation, probably. Taxes and tithers are like invisible chains. No matter how hard you work, you're always paying someone else, someone richer, someone with armor and a sword who doesn't have to dig the dirt or sleep on straw. Let's talk food. Remember that thin stew from part 1. That's your main course lunch, and dinner rolled into one. Variety doesn't exist unless you count weeds, and whatever wild roots you can sneak out to forage without getting caught by the Lord's gamekeepers. Hunting, forget it. That's a crime punishable by death or worse, so peasants eat what they're allowed to grow or collect. On lucky days, you get eggs or a bit of cheese, but meat is rarer than a sunny day in winter. Even when you do get meat, maybe a pig or a cow slaughter for a feast, you get crumbs. The Lord and his guests get the prime cuts, while you chew on bones for broth. Food scarcity means you learn to survive on little. Your stomach rumbles constantly, and you become familiar with the bitter taste of hunger. Sometimes you eat nettles or dandelions just to keep your guts moving. Your children don't fare much better. Malnutrition is common, and infant mortality rates are terrifying. If your child survives past 5, it's a small miracle. Childhood is brief, and the harsh world teaches kids to work from a young age. Let's not forget the weather. The cruelest, most indifferent force you'll ever know. Crop failures caused by drought floods or early frosts are disasters, wiping out your entire year's work in days. No insurance, no government aid, just starvation and more debt. And what happens when you can't pay your debts? The Lord might sell you or your family into servitude or prison. Desperate peasants sometimes try to flee to the city, but cities are crowded, filthy, and just as unforgiving. Running away is a gamble few survive. Speaking of survival, your life expectancy, roughly 30-35 years if you're lucky. Many peasants die in childhood or early adulthood. Death isn't a distant threat, it's an everyday companion lurking in the fields, by the fireside, and in the back of your mind. Now, imagine all of this while your body is breaking down from the constant labor. Cuts, bruises, infections, parasites, and you have no real medicine to heal you. Amputations were brutal and often fatal. Broken bones healed crooked and painful. Toothaches meant misery or death from infection. The church might offer spiritual comfort, but earthly relief was scarce. Your only hope was faith prayer and the mercy of a capricious God. But wait, there's still more joy in peasant life violence. Not the glorious kind with swords and armor, but daily violence. Theft, disputes over land or water, drunken brawls in the tavern. Bandits and mercenaries roamed the roads. If the local lord went to war, peasants got conscripted as cannon fodder with little training, poorly armed, and no backup. And let's not forget the social ladder, rigid, unforgiving, and impossible to climb. Nobles sneered at you, clergy ignored you, and even your neighbors might look down if your family's bad luck meant less land or smaller harvests. There was no social mobility. You were stuck, and that meant grinding poverty and humiliation. Even leisure was scarce. Festivals existed but were rare, expensive, and often turned into chaotic affairs with food fights, drunkenness, and sometimes deadly accidents. Your whole year was work punctuated by exhaustion. So, if you're still wondering why you wouldn't survive as a medieval peasant, it's because survival means outlasting hunger, disease, cold, exhaustion, violence, and despair. Every single day, the odds were stacked against you like stones in a broken plough. Your body and spirit were tested constantly, and the only real victory was waking up tomorrow to do it all again. So you think you've got a handle on the endless labor and starvation. Good. Now let's talk about something truly medieval: hygiene. Spoiler alert, it's basically non-existent. First, water. Yes, you fetch it daily, but it's rarely clean. The village well or nearby stream is your only source, and it's often shared with everyone: humans, animals, and unfortunately waste. Sewage systems. Fancy talk for cities, not your village. Most of your bathroom needs are handled by holes in the ground or just the edge of the forest. Bathing. If you mean standing naked in a cold river once a month and hoping not to catch hypothermia, then yes, you bathe. But most peasants don't bother because water is precious and cold, and soap is a luxury made from animal fat and ashes. Expensive and rare. Your clothes. Those same rags you wear day in and day out. They're rarely washed. The smell of sweat, dirt, and who knows what else clings to your skin like a second layer. This isn't just unpleasant, it's dangerous. Lice, fleas, and ticks thrive in these conditions, bringing diseases like typhus and plague right to your door. And speaking of diseases, the medieval peasant body was a magnet for parasites. Worms inside your intestines, fleas in your clothes, lice in your hair, they all made your life miserable. Sometimes, the itching and discomfort were worse than hunger. Dental care. What's that? Cavities, abscesses, and broken teeth were common, and pain was endured silently because the nearest barber, surgeon was miles away, or worse, too expensive. Tooth extraction was done with pliers or even your own hands, often without anesthesia. Imagine pulling your own teeth with a rusty nail. Oh, and childbirth. The moment every peasant woman dreaded. No hospitals, no doctors, no epidurals. Just the village midwife and a lot of hope. Childbirth was deadly, for both mother and child. Many women died young, leaving families to fend for themselves with half the workforce gone. That brings us to family life. You live in cramped quarters, sharing everything with everyone. Privacy doesn't exist. Kids play with sharp tools and fire, because there's nowhere safe to keep them. Education is a joke. If you're lucky, you learn to read prayers, but mostly you learn to obey and work hard. Love, romance. Marriage was usually arranged or based on survival. Marry the right person and you might combine resources. Marry the wrong person and misery doubles, divorce. Forget it. It's practically unheard of and punished severely. Then there's the law. The local lord's justice is swift, brutal, and usually unfair. Theft, even of a scrap of food, can mean mutilation or death. If you fall behind on your taxes, don't expect mercy. Trials are quick, with verdicts pre-decided, and punishments harsh. You're on the bottom rung. Justice is a tool to keep you there. Worse still are the constant wars. Lords fight each other for land and power, dragging peasants into their bloody disputes. When called to fight, you get a rusty sword, no armor, and a one-way ticket to misery. Surviving battle is luck, skill, and often sheer dumb luck. Wounded soldiers might be left to die on the battlefield because they're too poor to get proper care. Even when not at war, raiders and bandits prey on villages. You build crude defenses, but a surprise attack can mean death, destruction, and pillaging. Losing your home means starting from scratch, if you survive. Your social status means you're the last priority when it comes to help. Nobles might have fancy feasts and grand halls, but your meal is thin gruel in a wooden bowl. Your shelter is a hut barely keeping out the rain. Your clothes are patched so many times they're threadbare. And don't think education or skills will save you. Most peasants are illiterate, bound to the land, and expected to work. The church might teach some reading and writing, but mostly to boys who show promise. Girls learn to cook clean and bear children. Everyone else learns how to survive, barely. Religion is a big part of your life. The church is both a place of hope and control. It teaches obedience, promises heaven after death, and collects tithers from your meager harvest. Priests might be kind, but they're also the eyes and ears of the Lord, keeping tabs on the village. Heresy is a crime punishable by death. Every day, you're reminded of your place in the world. A tiny cog in a massive machine designed to keep the rich rich and the poor working until they drop. But here's the kicker. Despite all this, peasants keep going. They find small joys in simple things: a warm fire, a child's laugh, a rare sunny day. They tell stories, sing songs, and dream of better lives. Still, dreaming won't feed you, and survival depends on toughness, luck, and endurance. One bad harvest, one illness, one bad lord's whim, and you're gone. So why wouldn't you survive as a medieval peasant? Because the system is stacked against you from birth. Because every day is a battle with nature, man, and fate. because the margin between life and death is razor thin. In the next part, we'll dig deeper into the risks lurking beyond your fields, the plagues, famines, and feuds that could wipe out entire villages overnight. So, you've managed to scrape together a living from the land, fought off the grime and disease, endured the hunger and cold. But survival as a medieval peasant, it's about to get a whole lot worse, because lurking just beyond your fields are disasters that don't care if you're tired, hungry, or sick. Famines, plagues, feuds. These are the real killers. Let's start with famine. You know how your yearly harvest is a gamble. Sometimes the dice come up snake eyes. Too much rain, not enough rain, early frost, locusts. Any one of these could wipe out your crops. One bad season means no food, no seed for next year, and most likely, starvation. Famine isn't just hunger, it's a slow, cruel death. Your body wastes away, muscle melting into nothingness, your immune system collapsing just when you need it most. You become weak, dizzy, unable to work. And here's the worst part, famine spreads. If your village suffers, nearby villages do too. It's a domino effect of despair. With no food, people start doing desperate things. Theft spikes, tensions rise, families break apart. Sometimes you're forced to eat things you never dreamed of: rats, tree bark, or even the leaves off trees. Cannibalism? In extreme cases, yes. When death is at the door, survival instincts kick in. And then comes the plague. The Black Death. Might be the most infamous, but pestilence was a constant threat. Fleas on rats carrying deadly bacteria, filthy living conditions, and malnutrition created perfect conditions for disease to ravage villages. When plague hit, it moved fast and killed faster. Imagine waking up to find your neighbors dead overnight, or coughing up blood and feeling your own breath turn shallow and sharp. Doctors? Not really. Quarantine? Unknown. Most peasants just prayed and hoped they weren't next. Death was everywhere, in the fields, in the houses, even at the village well. Sometimes entire families disappeared, leaving empty huts and unharvested fields. Sometimes the village was abandoned, a ghost town swallowed by weeds and silence. If famine and plague didn't get you, violence might. Lords fought wars, but battles rarely stayed on the battlefield. Raids and pillaging were common. Your village might be burned to the ground by enemy soldiers or bandits looking for food and loot. Your lord might call upon you to fight in his war, sending you with little training and worse weapons. Many peasants never returned, their bodies left in mass graves or feeding scavengers. Surviving war meant luck, skill, and sheer stubbornness. Even in times of peace, local disputes turned ugly fast. Land boundaries were fuzzy, water rights were contested, and every villager's survival depended on a patch of land. Fights, sometimes deadly, broke out over the smallest things: a missing chicken, a stray pig, or a patch of good soil. The Lord's law was harsh and quick. You were guilty until proven innocent, which was impossible because peasants had no power or influence. Punishments were brutal: whipping, branding, imprisonment, or worse. The Lord's justice was meant to keep you scared and in line. And what if you wanted out? Escape the village and seek a better life. Cities were supposed to be places of opportunity. But the reality was grim. Cities were overcrowded, filthy, and filled with poor laborers just like you. Diseases thrived in narrow, stinking streets. Work was scarce and dangerous. You could become a laborer or a servant, but your life wouldn't improve much. And if you tried to run away from your lord, you were branded a fugitive, hunted down, and punished severely. Freedom was a distant dream, one that most peasants never dared to imagine. Now let's talk about the seasons, the real heartbeat of peasant life. Spring is hope, the season of planting and dreaming of a good harvest. But the work is brutal, preparing the fields, sowing seeds, and praying for rain. Summer is a constant battle against heat, pests, and weeds. Your hands blister, your back aches, but you keep going. Every day is a fight to protect your crops from insects and disease. Autumn should be harvest time, the reward for your labor. But harvests are tricky. If the weather turns bad, rain or frost can ruin everything. And once you harvest, you have to store the crops safely from rot and rodents. A single breach in your granary means weeks or months of food gone. Winter is the enemy, cold, dark, and merciless. The fields lie fallow, the animals are thin, and food runs low. You huddle around meager fires, trying to keep warm. If you're lucky, you have a small stockpile of food. If not, starvation looms. You spend the winter repairing tools, mending clothes, and praying the frost doesn't kill your family. It's a time of survival, not rest. And throughout the year, festivals and holy days break the monotony. If you can call a day off from backbreaking labor a break, these celebrations are brief, often marked by excessive drinking, feasting zebra if possible, and dancing. But they don't last, and the grind always returns. So, you see, surviving medieval peasant life isn't just about working hard. It's about fighting a constant battle with the natural world, disease, human cruelty, and a social system designed to keep you down. Every day is a gamble with your life, your family's lives, and your sanity. In the next part, we'll explore what happens when you get sick or injured, because the medieval world has no room for the weak. So, you're working your fingers to the bone, battling hunger, disease, weather, and the local lord's demands. But what happens when your body finally says, enough? What if you get sick or injured? Spoiler: the medieval world has zero tolerance for the weak. First off, illness was as common as dirt, sometimes dirtier, and almost always deadly if left untreated. Catch a cough, fever, or a bad wound, and you're basically on a one-way ticket to the grave. Modern medicine: nope. Your local doctor is likely the village barber, surgeon, a guy who cuts hair, pulls teeth, and maybe bleeds you with a rusty blade, all in one day. If you break a bone, good luck. There's no plaster or cast. Your bone might be set crooked or left to heal on its own, turning you into a permanent village hunchback. Or worse, infection sets in, turning a simple break into a festering death trap. Got a cut? If it's deep, expect it to get infected. No antibiotics here. Infection means pain, swelling, fever, and eventually death if the infection spreads to your blood. Sepsis. Gangrene could set in, and the only cure is amputation with a dull knife and zero anesthesia. The pain isn't just physical. The emotional toll of being sick or injured is crushing. You can't work, which means no food, no income, and less favor with the Lord. Your family suffers alongside you, and sometimes they have to beg or steal just to survive. Childbirth is another death trap. Peasant women give birth at home, often with nothing but a midwife and prayers. Complications are frequent and usually fatal. Mothers die, babies die, and families are left broken. With little or no birth control, pregnancies are frequent, and the toll on women's bodies is relentless. Chronic conditions, like arthritis or scabies, plague you for life. No cure, no relief. You learn to live with pain because survival depends on it. But say you survive an injury or illness, you're now weaker, slower, and more vulnerable. You might lose your place in the fields or your family's tiny patch of land. If you can't work, you can't pay your dues to the Lord or church. Debt piles up, and so does your risk of eviction, imprisonment, or worse. Mental health, forgotten, depression, anxiety, and trauma were real but invisible. No therapy, no support. Your mind battles alone alongside your body. Now imagine a peasant village struck by an epidemic. Everyone falls sick, bodies pile up, graves are dug hastily, and the stench of death hangs thick in the air. People abandon homes, fields lie untended, and famine soon follows. Survivors face starvation, fear, and loneliness. Your social network, family, neighbors, is your only defense. But what if your entire family dies? You're left isolated, with no protection, no support, and no way out. Medical treatment was often worse than the disease. Bloodletting, purging, and strange potions were common. Superstition ran rampant. If you got sick, you might be accused of witchcraft or cursed. Trials, torture, and execution weren't uncommon. Injuries from daily labor are just as deadly. Farming with crude tools, hauling heavy loads, or working in stone quarries could result in accidents. Loss of fingers, toes, or limbs could mean the end of your livelihood. Imagine trying to plow fields with one hand missing, or walking on a leg twisted from a fall. Your family's survival depends on you, but your body might betray you. And don't forget about your animals. Your oxen or horses are your lifeline. If they get sick or die, your workload doubles. Without them, plowing and hauling become almost impossible. So, when sickness or injury strikes, you're caught in a terrible trap. You need to rest to heal. But resting means losing your job, your income, and your standing. Pushing yourself too hard means worsening your condition. It's a no-win situation. Your fate is often decided by luck of surviving infection, of having family to care for you, or of the Lord's mercy. Spoiler alert, mercy is rare. This cycle of injury, illness, and despair often repeats itself throughout your short life. Surviving as a medieval peasant is a constant battle, not just with the elements or enemies, but with your own failing body and the brutal realities of medieval life. So far, you've survived dawn to dusk labor, hunger, disease, and death knocking at your door. But here's another grim truth: your identity, your very name, is stripped away by the rigid social order. In the next part, we'll dive into the crushing social hierarchy that keeps peasants firmly at the bottom, and how that shapes your every moment. Let's talk about something that's not just physical, but existential: your place in the medieval social order. Spoiler alert, you're stuck at the bottom, and the ladder is missing most of its rungs. You wake up every morning knowing this, no matter how hard you work, no matter how many blisters or bruises you earn. Your life is owned by someone else. You're not a person with dreams and desires. You're a resource, a cog in the grand machine of feudalism. Your identity, reduced to your role. You're not John or Mary anymore. You're the ploughman, the miller's wife, the serf. Your name might be remembered by your family, but to the Lord, you're just another peasant on the land. Replaceable, forgettable, invisible. The local lord holds all the cards. His word is law. He owns the land, the houses, the animals, and the people who live there. Your life depends on his whim. Need permission to marry? Ask the Lord. Want to leave the village? Ask the Lord. Want to inherit your parents' patch of land? The Lord decides. If you displease him, he can evict you, fine you, or punish you harshly. If you refuse to work on his fields, he can send his men to drag you back. Resistance isn't an option, it's a death sentence. The church isn't much better. It teaches obedience and submission. You tithe a tenth of everything you have, your crops, your animals, your time, to the church, which uses it to build grand cathedrals you'll never enter. Priests preach humility and suffering as virtues, telling you your reward lies not on earth, but in heaven. Education, a luxury for nobles and clergy. Most peasants are illiterate, bound by ignorance, not by choice but by design. The more you know, the more dangerous you are. Keeping peasants uneducated keeps them obedient. Marriage and family life are tools of survival, not romance. You marry young, sometimes in your early teens, because you're expected to produce children who will help work the land. Love is a bonus if you're lucky. Mostly it's an arrangement for survival. Your children will follow in your footsteps, bound to the land, trapped by the same system. The idea of social mobility is a cruel joke. Nobles marry nobles, peasants marry peasants. The class divide is a wall taller than any castle tower. Peasant rebellions do happen, but they're rare, brutally suppressed, and often led by desperation rather than strategy. If you join a revolt and lose, death or worse awaits. If you don't join, you live in fear of being accused of sympathy. Even leisure is regulated. The Lord controls festivals and holidays, using them to enforce loyalty. You get to celebrate only when permitted, and even then, it's more about reminding you of your place than giving you freedom. You don't own your home or land. You pay rent, usually in labor, for the patch you till. If the crops fail or you're sick, rent still comes due. Failure means eviction, starvation, or worse. Your rights, limited to the bare minimum needed to keep you alive and working. There's no legal protection against cruelty. Lords and their men can act with impunity. On market days, you sell your goods, vegetables, eggs, wool, but you never get the full price. Middlemen, taxes, and church tithers take their cut. The profits are thin and competition fierce. If you get injured or sick, you can't afford to stop working. Your family depends on your labor, so you hide your pain, push through illness, and hope your body holds out a little longer. Your status shapes how others treat you. Nobles look down on you with disdain. Clergy might pity you but won't lift a finger to help. Other peasants are your community but also your competition. You live in a world where appearance matters. Dirty clothes, rough hands, and callous feet mark you as a peasant instantly. You have no chance to change that image. You don't vote, own property, or have a voice in governance. Your existence is subject to decisions made by distant lords and kings, whose lives are unimaginably different from yours. This rigid social structure isn't just a backdrop, it's a cage. A cage that shapes your every thought, action, and hope. Even death is controlled. The church dictates burial rites, often offering only a simple grave with a wooden cross. Your funeral is modest, reflecting your status. The social hierarchy affects your mental world too. Constant humiliation, lack of control, and despair weigh heavily. Many peasants live in quiet resignation, dreaming of a better life, but accepting their fate. Hope might come from religion or community, but it's fragile. Every day brings new challenges that remind you of your place. So why wouldn't you survive as a medieval peasant? Because your life isn't yours. You're bound by laws, customs, and expectations that keep you trapped in poverty, labor, and suffering. Survival means navigating a system designed to keep you down, where every step forward is met with resistance. In the next part, we'll explore the daily tools and weapons of peasant life, from pitchforks to kitchen knives, and how you use them to survive, defend, or sometimes fight back. Alright, so you're stuck at the bottom of the social ladder, owned by the Lord, ruled by the church, and barely surviving the endless grind. But here's a fun twist. Despite all that, you have tools and weapons. Mostly crude, usually dangerous, but absolutely essential. Your survival often depends on what you can wield, build, or defend yourself with. Welcome to the medieval peasant's toolbox and armory, if you can call it that. First up, the pitchfork. This isn't just for poking hay bales or manure piles. It's your primary weapon, your walking stick, and sometimes your only defense against wild animals, bandits, or angry neighbors. The pitchfork is heavy, awkward, and requires some skill to use without impaling yourself. But pointy sticks are effective when you're outnumbered or desperate. Then there's the wooden club or staff. Easy to make, versatile, and surprisingly effective at knocking someone senseless. Not much to look at, but when you're facing down an armed thief or a drunken lord's soldier, it's better than bare hands. These clubs are also used to beat stubborn animals or fend off wolves at night. The kitchen knife is another prized possession, sharp enough to cut vegetables, but also for protecting your family. It's small, easy to hide, and deadly in close quarters. Don't get caught with it. Though, knives could be confiscated by local authorities or lord's men, and carrying weapons without permission is risky business. Next, the flail. A terrifying weapon if you ever saw one, but rare for peasants because it's mostly a knight's tool. If you do have one, it probably came from an old soldier or was crafted in a desperate moment. It's heavy, unwieldy, and easy to trip yourself with, but it packs a brutal punch. You'd have better luck with pitchforks and knives. Your farming tools double as weapons too. The scythe and sickle, used for cutting crops, can become lethal blades in the right hands. But they're heavy and not designed for fighting, so swinging one recklessly could leave you open to attack. Then, there's the bow and arrow. Hunting was mostly forbidden, but if you got caught with a bow in the forest, it wasn't just confiscation you feared, it could be death. Still, some peasants managed to hunt small game with bows, both for food and defense. Arrows are expensive and bows need skill, so these were rare and treasured. If you were lucky, you might have a shield, usually a crude wooden board patched together to fend off blows. Nothing fancy, no heraldry or shining metal, but enough to block a club or a blade. Holding a shield isn't easy when you're already exhausted from the day's labor, but it can mean the difference between life and death. Armor. Peasants generally didn't wear armor. Chainmail and plate were reserved for knights and nobles. You'd be lucky to have thick leather gloves or a padded jerkin, which provided minimal protection. Most peasants wore simple tunics and trousers that did nothing to stop a sword or spear. So, you're basically fighting the world with sticks, knives, and hope. The problem: your opponents don't often come unarmed. Soldiers, bandits, and even some angry lord's men carry swords, axes, and maces. They're trained, armored, and vicious. Your chances in a fight aren't great unless you catch them by surprise or have numbers on your side. Violence is a constant threat, not just from invaders, but from disputes within the village. Arguments over land, water, or stolen goods can escalate quickly. When tempers flare, your pitchfork becomes a weapon of last resort. But survival isn't just about weapons. It's about knowing how to use your environment. Peasants learn to hide, run, or outsmart enemies. They use barns, forests, and rivers to escape or ambush attackers. Sometimes silence is the best weapon. Fire is another tool. You build fires to cook and keep warm, but you also use smoke and flames to ward off wolves or thieves. Lighting a fire near your crops or homes could be a desperate act of defense or revenge. But it's a dangerous gamble. A single spark could burn down the entire village. Your tools are also essential for daily survival. The axe is crucial for chopping wood to cook and heat your home, but axes double as weapons and can cause serious damage in a fight. The hoe and spade help till the land, but can also be wielded against an attacker. These tools are heavy and tiring to use in combat, but desperation gives you strength. Your clothes, patched and worn, provide minimal protection from weather and injury. Leather boots might save your feet from thorns or rocks but won't stop a blade. Helmets, never. They're a luxury for knights and soldiers. In many ways, your tools are your lifeline and your only defense. Losing or breaking one can be catastrophic. Imagine trying to plow without a plow or defend your family without a knife. Training, minimal. Most peasants learn to use tools by necessity, not by choice. Fighting skills are passed down informally, through hard lessons and painful mistakes. You learn to defend yourself, your family, and your land because no one else will. Sometimes, peasants band together to protect their village. A group armed with pitchforks, clubs, and farming tools might stand against bandits or soldiers. Numbers can make a difference, but battles are brutal and casualties high. If you survive violence, your injuries might never fully heal. Permanent scars, crippled limbs, or lost fingers are common. This makes continuing your work even harder, and your family's survival more precarious. So, your survival depends on your tools, your wits, and your ability to endure pain and hardship. But even with all this, violence isn't the only danger lurking. In the next part, we'll dive into the constant threat of natural disasters, floods, storms, and fires, and how they can wipe away everything you've built in a single night. So, you've got your pitchfork, your knife, your battered tools, and your wits sharpened like a dull blade. You think you're ready to take on medieval peasant life. Hold on, because nature isn't done with you yet. It doesn't care about your hard work, your prayers, or your tired body. Floods, storms, fires. These disasters will hit you like a hammer and leave you wondering why you ever thought survival was possible. Let's start with floods. Your village likely sits near a river or stream, a blessing and a curse. Rivers bring water to your crops, but they can also bring destruction. When heavy rains come, and they come often, rivers overflow. Suddenly your fields are underwater, your crops rotting in mud, your homes damaged or washed away. Imagine waking up to find your floor turned into a swamp, your belongings floating or lost. Floodwater carries filth, dead animals, and who knows what diseases. Drinking water becomes contaminated. Cholera and dysentery spread fast when the water's bad. Floods destroy not just your harvest, but your food stores, your tools, even your animals. Replacing any of that is almost impossible. The Lord might offer sympathy, or he might demand rent anyway. No insurance, no aid. You're on your own. Then there are storms, ferocious, sudden, and devastating. Lightning tears down trees, smashing roofs. Winds howl like banshees, ripping apart wooden huts and barns. A single storm can flatten your entire village in minutes. The cold after a storm can kill you faster than the wind. Wet clothes, soaked bedding, and flooded hearths mean hypothermia is a constant threat. You try to dry your things by the fire, but if your roof leaks or your chimney collapses, even that fails. Lightning strikes can start fires, which brings us to another nightmare. Fires in a medieval village are hell on earth. Wooden buildings, thatched roofs, and open flames mean fire spreads fast. A careless spark, a knocked-over candle, or a cooking accident can ignite a blaze that devours everything. If fire comes, your only choice is to run and watch your home, food, and life burn to ashes. Firefighters? Nope. No organized help. You might form a bucket brigade, passing water from the river to the flames, but often it's too little, too late. After a fire, you're homeless, hungry, and vulnerable. Rebuilding takes months or years. The Lord might force you to pay for repairs or evict you if you can't. Natural disasters don't discriminate. They don't care if you're weak or strong, rich or poor. They come with brutal force and leave death and destruction behind. And if you survive one disaster, another might be waiting. A bad harvest after a flood, disease after a fire, cold after a storm. It's a cycle of misery, Your animals suffer too. Floods drown them, storms frighten them, fires kill them. Losing animals means losing food, labor, and income. Your soil gets washed away or poisoned, making farming harder next year. Crops fail, hunger returns, and the cycle begins anew. Disasters also test your community. Sometimes neighbors band together to help. Sometimes desperation leads to theft, violence, or abandonment. When your village faces ruin, your social bonds are strained. Everyone's survival is on the line, and trust becomes fragile. You might see families break apart, with some members fleeing in search of better land or work. Those left behind face starvation and loneliness. The Lord's response is often indifferent or cruel. He might increase taxes to rebuild his manor, ignoring your losses. Or he might use disasters as excuses to seize more land or labor. Surviving natural disasters is about resilience, luck, and the strength of your community. But even the strongest can be broken. So, after years of backbreaking work, poor food, sickness, and social oppression, you also face a relentless natural world that doesn't give second chances. Medieval peasants lived on the edge of survival, always balancing on a knife's edge between life and death. One bad season, one storm, one fire, and everything you've worked for can vanish. And that's not even the end of the story. Disease, war, famine, cold, all those other threats lurk just around the corner. In the next part, we'll explore what it's like to live under the constant shadow of war and conflict. Because when armies march, peasants suffer. You thought the worst had passed. Think again. Living as a medieval peasant means never being far from the sound of marching boots, the glare of burning villages, and the sharp whistle of arrows overhead. War is not just a distant clash between kings and nobles. It's a nightmare that creeps into your daily life, turning survival into a desperate gamble. War isn't glamorous or heroic when you're a peasant. There are no epic battles or glorious victories for you. You're the collateral damage, the expendable muscle, the food and fodder for armies whose real fight is about power and land. Your lord might call you to arms. Sometimes that means grabbing a rusty pitchfork or a borrowed sword and marching off to fight in a noble's quarrel you don't understand. You get little training, lousy weapons, and worse chances. Many peasants die on the battlefield, while the knights and nobles live in castles. Even if you're not fighting, war is everywhere. Armies march through your lands, eating your crops, killing your animals, and burning your homes. Soldiers don't distinguish between enemy or ally once hunger sets in. They take what they need and leave destruction behind. Your village becomes a battleground, or worse, a target for pillaging. Raiders and mercenaries roam the countryside, looking for easy victims. When your home is raided, you watch helplessly as everything you own is stolen or destroyed. Sometimes, your lord's enemies use your village as a strategic point. They build camps, dig trenches, and use your fields for supplies. You're caught in the crossfire, forced to choose sides or hide, and hope you're not caught. Refusal to support your lord's war effort isn't an option. You might be forced to provide food, labor, or shelter for soldiers. Refusal means punishment, imprisonment, fines, or worse. When the fighting comes close, everyone scrambles for safety. Women, children, and the elderly flee to forests or neighboring villages if they can. The young men are either fighting or hiding, fearing both the enemy and their own lord's wrath. Hospitals don't exist. Wounded soldiers and peasants alike suffer without proper care. Infection and disease spread rapidly in makeshift camps. Death often follows injury faster than swords do. The psychological toll is immense. The constant fear, loss of loved ones, and destruction of homes weigh on you. Some go mad, others turn violent. Communities fracture under the strain. War disrupts farming cycles, causing food shortages and famine. Seeds can't be sown, harvests can't be gathered, and fields lie fallow while armies pass. Hunger becomes as deadly as swords. Your social bonds are tested. Neighbors might turn on each other for scarce resources. Suspicion, theft, and violence rise. Trust is fragile, and cooperation is necessary but difficult. Despite all this, peasants sometimes resist. Small uprisings, sabotage, and secret aid to enemy forces happen, though rarely successfully. Such acts bring brutal reprisals. Survival during wartime requires more than strength or skill. It demands cunning, adaptability, and luck. You learn to hide, to negotiate, and sometimes to betray to live another day. War also changes the landscape. Forests are cut down for siege engines and fires, rivers are diverted, and roads are trampled. The land you depend on is scarred and less productive. After the fighting ends, rebuilding begins. If you're still alive, homes, barns, and fences must be repaired. Fields must be replowed and resown. But with fewer hands and little food, recovery is slow and uncertain. Taxes and rents don't pause for war. You still owe the Lord, still must pay tithes to the church, even when your land lies in ruin. Failure to pay leads to eviction, imprisonment, or worse. Sometimes war brings change. New lords, new laws, and new rulers might offer hope or further hardship. But for most peasants, the cycle of hardship continues. In the end, war is a reminder of your place, disposable, voiceless, and endlessly exploited. You fight battles not for glory, but simply to survive another day. Next, we'll explore the merciless grip of famine, how hunger stalks you relentlessly, and why a bad harvest could mean your end. So, war grinds your village to dust, soldiers trample your fields, and your neighbors vanish or perish. But even when the battle drums fade, another enemy waits in the shadows: famine. Hunger is a relentless predator, stalking every corner of your life, ready to pounce when the harvest fails or the granaries run dry. And believe me, famine doesn't care if you're strong, smart, or lucky. It will take you down anyway. Famine isn't just being hungry. It's months, sometimes years, of scraping together scraps, rationing every crumb, and watching your family waste away in slow motion agony. Your stomach twists and cramps, your muscles weaken, and your mind fogs over with desperation. Hunger makes you weaker, slower, and more vulnerable to everything else: disease, cold, injury. Your crops are your lifeline, but they're fragile. A bad season means no grain, no vegetables, and no seeds for next year. If the rains don't come or come too much, your fields drown or parch. Locusts can sweep through in a cloud of destruction, eating everything green in minutes. Even animals die from lack of food or disease. When the harvest fails, the village's food stores dwindle quickly. Granaries filled with grain for the winter become empty husks. You start eating the seeds meant for next spring, dooming the next planting season. Desperation pushes you to eat anything: roots, bark, even rats. Starvation twists your body and mind. Famine breaks families apart. Adults become weak and unable to work. Children cry with hunger. Mothers can't feed babies. People become sick, and without food or medicine, illness spreads like wildfire. Starving bodies can't fight infections, and death claims the old, the young, and the ill first. Sometimes the Lord offers aid, grain from his stores or reduced rents, but it's never enough. The church might organize charity, but it's a drop in a vast, starving ocean. Most of your survival depends on what little you can scavenge or steal. Stealing food is dangerous. Punishments are harsh: whipping, imprisonment, or even execution. But when hunger claws at your belly, morals blur. Starving people become desperate, and desperation breeds crime. Hunger also breeds conflict. Villagers argue over food, blame neighbors, or turn violent. Families might abandon those who can't work or care for themselves. Trust breaks down as everyone fights for survival. Famine doesn't just affect you physically, it destroys hope. Dreams of a better life fade when your days are spent trying to keep your own belly from eating itself. Children grow up weak and stunted, adults lose strength and will. In some regions, famine lasts for years, followed by plague and war, a triple threat that devastates entire populations. Historical records show villages wiped off maps, whole regions depopulated, and kingdoms shaken to their core. You might think moving to a city would help, but overcrowded towns also suffer famine and disease. Food prices soar, work dries up. Cities can be death traps, especially during bad times. Famine also reveals the brutal inequality of medieval society. Nobles eat well, feast, and celebrate, while peasants starve in silence. Your suffering fills their coffers through taxes and tithes. The church preaches patience and faith, promising rewards in the afterlife while your stomach grumbles today. The physical toll of famine is horrific. Your skin thins and tightens over bones. Your hair falls out, your teeth decay. You become gaunt, weak, and slow. Your immune system collapses, making even a minor cold deadly. Mental health collapses too. Anxiety, despair, and hopelessness weigh heavy. You might dream of food so vividly it wakes you up in tears. Some lose their minds, others turn to religion or superstition for comfort. But famine isn't just a personal tragedy, it shapes history. Entire wars, migrations, and revolutions have roots in hunger. Societies rise and fall on the back of harvests and granaries. Surviving famine means more than hunger. It means avoiding disease, violence, and social collapse. It means community strength and stubborn hope. But make no mistake, famine is a slow death, one that no peasant was fully prepared to survive. Next, we'll explore the everyday dangers you face from animals, wild and domestic, and how they could end your life or ruin your livelihood in a heartbeat. So, the war drums have finally faded, the soldiers have marched away, and your village stands in ruins. You might think that the worst is behind you, but famine is lurking right around the corner, ready to snatch away whatever scraps of life you manage to cling to. Hunger isn't just a gnawing pain in your belly, it's a brutal, unrelenting force that strips away everything, slowly and mercilessly. And trust me, famine doesn't care who you are, how hard you've worked, or how much you pray. It will take you down, one agonizing day at a time. Let's start with the harvest, your only hope for surviving the coming winter. It's a fragile thing, hanging by a thread. One season of bad weather can wipe it out. Too much rain, not enough rain, early frost, or a swarm of locusts that devours everything green faster than you can scream. Your crops fail, and with them goes the food you rely on. The fields you've worked so hard to till become barren. The granary, which should be your safety net, grows emptier by the day. That grain you carefully save for winter, gone eaten or ruined. Soon there's nothing left but dust and the hollow sound of hunger in your belly. You start eating the seeds meant for next year's planting, dooming the future for a chance at surviving the present. This is the trap famine sets. Short-term survival at the cost of long-term disaster. When the food runs out, your stomach cramps with hunger that never really leaves. Your muscles waste away. Walking becomes a chore, working the fields, nearly impossible. Hunger weakens your immune system, opening the door for disease. Fevers, coughs, and infections strike like daggers through your fragile body. Famine isn't just about your body breaking down. It's about the slow disintegration of your community. Families turn against each other, fighting over scraps and blame. Neighbors who once shared meals become strangers driven by desperation. Children cry with empty bellies. Mothers weep silently in the dark. You try to find food wherever you can. Roots, bark, wild berries. Anything to fill the void. Rats become a grim delicacy. Some even turn to stealing from their neighbors or the Lord's stores, risking brutal punishments if caught. Thieves are hanged, thieves are whipped. Some never come home. Hunger makes criminals of the innocent. If the famine drags on, it brings death in waves. The old and the weak go first, then children, who can't fight the hunger or disease. You watch life fade from the faces you love, powerless to stop it. Each death is a blow, a hole in your heart and community. Even those who survive the worst seasons are marked forever. Stunted growth, brittle bones, and scars from illness are common. Your body remembers the famine long after your belly fills again. And your mind, it carries the weight of loss, fear, and despair. The Lord may show pity, but it's limited. He demands his rents and tithes no matter how empty your larder. If you fail to pay, he takes your land, your home, or worse. The church tells you to be patient, that your suffering will be rewarded in heaven. But that promise doesn't stop your children from crying tonight. Famine hits hardest in villages like yours, where there's no backup plan. No supermarkets, no social welfare, no government aid. Survival depends on the land, the weather, and your stubborn will. Cities aren't always a refuge. Overcrowding means disease spreads fast, and food prices skyrocket when supplies run low. Many starving peasants flood towns, hoping for work or charity, but find only misery and death. When famine strikes, it changes everything. Birth rates drop, marriages are postponed or cancelled. Those who can flee might try their luck elsewhere, but migration is dangerous and uncertain. Leaving home means leaving everything familiar. Your family, your land, your identity. Famine also triggers fear and superstition. People look for scapegoats, witches, strangers, or even neighbors, blaming them for the hardship. Sometimes, violent witch hunts or expulsions follow, adding terror to the suffering. Your relationship with nature turns bitter. The earth, once a giver of life, feels like a cruel taskmaster. Rain becomes a curse, sun, a torment. You pray for rain and fear it in equal measure. When the famine finally breaks, If it ever does, the scars remain. Land lies fallow, villages shrink, and survivors carry memories of hunger and loss. Rebuilding takes years, and some never fully recover. Famine shapes history too. It topples kingdoms, sparks revolts, and shifts the balance of power. But for you it's personal. It's every missed meal, every weak child, every sleepless night wondering if you'll live to see another day. In the face of famine, survival is about more than food. It's about community, resilience, and the harsh reality of living on the edge. Next, we'll dive into the dangers that come not from weather or war, but from the animals, wild and domestic, who could just as easily end your life or ruin your livelihood. You've faced hunger gnawing at your bones, war tearing through your village, and disasters laying waste to your home. But the dangers don't stop there. In a world ruled by nature's cruel laws, animals, both wild and domestic, are another threat to your survival. From venomous snakes to ravenous wolves, and even the livestock you depend on, animals could turn your life upside down in a heartbeat. Let's start with the wild ones. Wolves were a constant menace in the medieval countryside. Packs roamed forests and hills, hunting anything that moved, sometimes even bold enough to snatch a child or attack livestock near the village. You might think a group of peasants armed with pitchforks and clubs could chase them off, but wolves are cunning and fast. They hunted at night, striking when your defenses were down. Losing a sheep or cow to wolves meant losing precious food, milk, and income. Sometimes villagers banded together to hunt wolves, but it was dangerous work. One wrong step and you became the prey. Bears too lurked in the forests, massive, unpredictable, and deadly. Though less common, bear attacks were feared. A single charge could crush a man, and escaping one was nearly impossible without weapons or luck. Snakes, though smaller, were a stealthy killer. Venomous snakes lived in stone walls and under rocks, biting those who unknowingly disturbed their lairs. With no antivenom, a snake bite was often a death sentence. Foxes, badgers, and wild boars caused trouble by raiding crops or destroying fences. Wild boars especially were aggressive, capable of goring a person with their tusks. Many peasants had scars or broken bones from encounters with boars defending their territory. Insects were another nightmare. Ticks, lice, and fleas infested both people and animals, spreading diseases and causing unbearable itching and discomfort. Flies swarmed around open wounds and food, spreading infection. Now, your domesticated animals, your most valuable assets, were both your lifeline and a constant source of risk. Oxen and horses pulled your plough and cart, but they were prone to injury and illness. A lame ox could mean the end of your farming season. Treating sick animals was guesswork, and if you couldn't nurse them back to health, you faced starvation. Cattle could also be unpredictable. Stampedes or aggressive bulls could trample or gore you. Chickens, pigs, and goats provided food but needed constant care and protection from predators. Diseases didn't spare animals. Renderpest and other plagues wiped out herds, devastating peasant livelihoods. Losing livestock meant losing food, fertilizer, labor, and income. Some animals also carried diseases dangerous to humans. Cows and sheep could pass on parasites, rats and mice, common in granaries, spread plague. Speaking of rats, they were the true silent killers of medieval life. They infested homes, ate stored grain, and carried fleas infected with the Black Death. Rat bites, contamination, and the diseases they spread claimed more lives than swords or storms. Protecting your home and animals was a full-time job. You built fences, barns, and traps. You kept watch at night, armed with torches and whatever weapons you had. Sleep was broken by animal noises or the occasional scream when a predator struck. But even with all your efforts, losses were inevitable. Every missing chicken, every broken fence, every night a wolf howled too close to your door reminded you of your vulnerability. Animals didn't just threaten your survival, they shaped your daily routine, your fears, and your strategies. You learned to read animal behavior, to understand the signs of danger. You respected the forest's dangers but needed its resources, wood, food, game, to survive. Your relationship with animals was complicated. You depended on them, feared them, and sometimes fought them. They were both family and foe. Your livestock was your wealth, your security, and your future. Without them, you were helpless, yet their care demanded time, energy, and skill, luxuries in a life already stretched thin. Injuries from animals, bites, kicks, scratches, could lead to infection and death. A wound from a goat's horn or a horse's kick wasn't a minor scrape, it could be your last. Animals also played a role in your social and religious life. Some were sacred, others symbolic. Livestock were offerings to gods or lords. Festivals celebrated animals and harvests alike. But when survival is on the line, religion and symbolism offer little comfort against a pack of wolves or a plague of rats. In the next part, we'll explore how medieval peasants dealt with disease, the invisible enemy that struck harder and more silently than any army or storm. You've fought off wolves, survived famine, and endured war's cruel touch. But now comes the invisible enemy, disease. In medieval peasant life, sickness was as common and deadly as the cold wind biting through your threadbare clothes. You didn't need an army to bring you to your knees. A cough, a fever, or a mysterious rash could seal your fate faster than a sword. Medical knowledge was a patchwork of superstition, folk remedies, and prayers. The local barber, surgeon might pull a tooth or lance a boil, but real cures were rare and unreliable. Medicine was mostly about balancing the body's four humours: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. A theory so flawed that treatments often made you sicker. Disease spread like wildfire in your village. Crowded living, poor sanitation, and lack of clean water made it a perfect breeding ground. Open sewers ran through streets, garbage piled outside homes, and animals lived close to humans, all contributing to the endless cycle of infection. Common illnesses like dysentery and typhoid thrived in these conditions. They caused dehydration, diarrhea, and death, especially in children and the elderly. Even minor wounds could turn fatal when infected with bacteria you couldn't see. The plague, known as the Black Death, was the worst horror imaginable. Rats carrying fleas infected with Yersinia pestis brought it from distant lands, spreading death through villages and towns. Whole families vanished in weeks. Neighbors fled, and churches overflowed with the dead. No one understood how it spread, so fear and superstition ruled. People blamed witches, foreigners, or divine punishment. Some ran away, others hid behind masks or burned incense, hoping to ward off the invisible killer. Quarantine was rudimentary and often ignored. The sick were abandoned or locked away in hovels, left to die alone. Priests risked their lives to give last rites, while the healthy lived in terror. Survivors of disease were forever changed, weak, scarred, and often outcast. With so many dead, labor shortages followed, causing economic and social upheaval. But for peasants, the loss was personal. Every death was a hole in the fabric of family and community. Your everyday life was full of small illnesses too. Colds, coughs, fevers, stomach ailments. They drained your strength. You learned to tough it out because rest meant lost wages, and lost wages meant starvation. Many relied on herbal remedies, roots, leaves, and poultices gathered from the forest. Some helped, others were poison. You depended on wise women or healers who passed knowledge orally, but even their powers were limited. Childbirth was perilous. Many mothers and babies died in labor or soon after. Midwives helped, but without modern medicine, complications were often fatal. Mental health suffered under the weight of constant illness and death. Depression, anxiety, and despair were common, though rarely spoken of. You found solace in religion or community, but the toll was heavy. Plague, famine, war, and disease created a world where death was never far away. You buried your loved ones in simple graves, often without ceremony. Life was short, brutal, and uncertain. Your survival wasn't just about fighting visible threats. It was about enduring the constant assault of sickness and decay. In the next part, we'll delve into the harsh realities of medieval justice and punishment, where laws were harsh and mercy was rare. You faced wolves in the night, hunger gnawing at your bones, and the ravages of war tearing through your village. But now, prepare yourself for an enemy more terrifying because it's invisible, relentless, and utterly merciless: disease. Living as a medieval peasant means disease isn't just a possibility, it's an inevitability. It will visit you, your family, and your neighbors more times than you can count. And most of the time, it will take lives without warning or mercy. Medical knowledge in your world is primitive at best and dangerous at worst. The doctors you might hear about, barber, surgeons, apothecaries, and monks, offer little more than herbs, superstition, and bloodletting. The idea of germs or bacteria, completely unknown. Instead, they believe in balancing the four humus: Inside your body, blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Too much or too little of any, and you're sick. The cures involve leeches, purging, or cutting open the skin. More often than not, these treatments only make you worse. Sanitation in your village is nearly non-existent. Waste flows openly in ditches, and your drinking water is drawn from the same sources animals drink from. The streets are muddy, littered with refuse, and crawling with rats and insects. This environment is a paradise for disease. Anywhere you go, you're exposed to invisible killers waiting for the chance to invade your body. Common illnesses like dysentery, cholera, typhoid, and various fevers are constant companions. These diseases dehydrate you, sap your strength, and often end in death, especially for the young, old, and weak. A simple cut or scratch can become infected and fester without proper care, turning deadly. Then there's the nightmare known as the Black Death. It's the plague that arrived from distant lands, carried by fleas on rats, and changed the world forever. You might have heard whispers in your village about neighbors dying within days of feeling sick, their bodies covered in black boils and turning gangrenous. Entire families wiped out, the streets filled with death so quickly that there were no hands left to bury the bodies. Fear gripped the living tighter than any soldier's sword. No one knows exactly how the plague spreads. Some say it's a punishment from God for sins, others blame witches or foreigners. Superstition runs rampant. People run away, locking themselves indoors, or wear masks stuffed with herbs and flowers to purify the air. Others burn incense or whip themselves in penance, desperate to keep the sickness away. But none of it works. When someone falls ill, they're often isolated or left alone to die. There's no proper hospital care, just makeshift huts where the sick are left to suffer, sometimes chained to prevent them from spreading the disease. Priests risk their lives to give last rites, but the plague claims the clergy as well. Survivors watch helplessly as loved ones vanish one by one. If you survive the plague or other diseases, you're marked. Your body may be weak, your immune system compromised, and your spirit broken. Many survivors become social outcasts, feared as carriers or cursed by God. Beyond plague, other illnesses plague your daily life. Colds and coughs wear you down, while stomach troubles, fevers, and skin diseases make work impossible. Rest is a luxury you can't afford, and pushing through sickness is often the only option to keep your family alive. Herbal remedies are your best hope. Midwives and wise women use roots, leaves, and flowers from the forest to make poultices, teas, and salves. Sometimes these help soothe the pain or reduce fever, but other times they're poison. Healing is more guesswork than science. Childbirth is a constant risk. Many mothers and infants die during or soon after delivery. Midwives assist with what knowledge they have, but complications like bleeding, infections, or stillbirths are common and often fatal. Mental anguish accompanies physical suffering. The constant presence of death weighs on your mind. Depression, anxiety, and hopelessness spread quietly alongside the diseases. Yet speaking of such feelings is rare. Survival depends on keeping your spirit together, even as the world around you falls apart. Disease doesn't just take lives, it shapes society. Labor shortages caused by epidemics lead to higher wages and social unrest. Nobles scramble to keep power as peasants demand better conditions. But for most peasants, this is little consolation amid so much loss. Your village becomes a place of whispered fears and silent graves. You bury your dead quickly and simply. No grand ceremonies, no markers, just shallow holes in the earth. The church tries to provide solace, but the sheer scale of death overwhelms even their faith. Disease teaches you that survival is about endurance, resilience, and community. Those who help each other, share food, and care for the sick have a better chance of living through outbreaks. But even then, survival is never guaranteed. In this brutal world, every cough could be the start of the end. Every fever a death sentence. You live with one eye on the sky and another on the growing pile of graves. And when you think about the future, you wonder if there even is one. In the next part, we'll explore the harsh realities of medieval justice and punishment, how laws were enforced, the brutality of punishments, and how little mercy was shown to peasants like you. So you've endured famine, disease, war, and the dangers lurking in the wild, and still, your struggles are far from over. In medieval peasant life, justice isn't about fairness or mercy. It's about power, control, and brutal enforcement that keeps you in your place. Laws are written by nobles for nobles, and punishments are harsh, swift, and often cruel. One wrong step, one unlucky accusation, and your life can spiral into pain and misery beyond anything you imagined. You might think that crimes like theft, assault, or disobedience would be judged carefully, but the reality is more brutal than a soldier's sword. Justice is a spectacle designed to scare and punish, not to heal or reform. If you're caught stealing a loaf of bread or a few potatoes to feed your starving family, expect severe punishment. Fines, maybe, but often whipping, branding, or even mutilation. A thief might have a hand chopped off or be placed in stocks to endure public humiliation. Repeat offences. Execution. The Lord's court controls the law. You don't get a jury of your peers or a lawyer. You stand before the Lord or his appointed officials, men who see you as nothing more than a tool or a nuisance. Their decisions are final, based on what's best for the Lord's authority and wealth, not justice. Even small disputes, like arguments over land boundaries, unpaid rents, or debts, can escalate into legal battles where the poor have little chance. The rich hire advocates. You argue alone, your voice drowned out by power and money. Punishments are often public, meant to send a message. Flogging in the village square, stocks in the town centre, or worse, hanging from a gallows visible to all. The pain isn't just physical, it's meant to break your spirit and keep others in line. If you speak out against the Lord or resist taxes, expect brutal retaliation. Rebellion is crushed with fire and sword. Leaders are executed, villages burned, and the rest forced into submission. Your neighbors might be killed or sold into slavery as a warning. Justice is swift and merciless. There's no room for mercy or second chances. Even crimes like witchcraft or heresy bring terrifying consequences. Accusations, often based on fear, envy, or superstition, lead to trials where torture is common. People confess to things they didn't do just to stop the pain. Executions by burning, hanging, or drowning are not uncommon. For peasants, the law is a cage. It keeps you tied to your land, your lord, and your misery. It punishes the poor while protecting the powerful. In addition to punishment, law enforcement is harsh and often violent. The Lord's men, bailiffs, constables, and watchmen, patrol the villages and roads enforcing order with clubs, swords, and sometimes cruelty. They collect taxes, break up fights, and arrest anyone who steps out of line. Bribery and corruption are common. Officials often demand extra payments or favors to overlook offenses. Refusal can mean harsher treatment. If you're accused of a crime, proving your innocence is nearly impossible. Trials often rely on oaths, character witnesses, or ordeals, dangerous tests like holding hot iron or drowning, where survival is seen as proof of innocence. These ordeals often lead to injury or death. The threat of punishment shapes every part of your life. Fear keeps you obedient, silent, and cautious. You watch your words, your actions, and your neighbors, knowing that even a rumor can lead to disaster. Despite this, peasants sometimes resist. Secret gatherings, smuggling, or small acts of defiance happen in the shadows, but open rebellion is rare because the consequences are too severe. Even religious authorities hold power over you. The church enforces moral laws, sin, blasphemy, or heresy, through fines, excommunication, or worse. Fear of eternal damnation is used to control behavior alongside physical punishment. In the end, justice in medieval times isn't about fairness, it's about control. It's another tool used to keep peasants like you bound to a life of hardship, obedience, and fear. Next, we'll explore the crushing weight of taxes and rents, the never-ending demands that drain your meager resources and deepen your struggle for survival. By now, you've seen how war, famine, disease, animals, and harsh justice wear you down. But don't think you're done yet. One of the biggest burdens you carry every day, heavier than a sack of grain and sharper than a blacksmith's hammer, is the endless weight of taxes and rents. These are the invisible chains that keep you shackled to poverty, no matter how hard you work or how many seasons you survive. As a peasant, you don't own the land you live on. That belongs to your lord, a man or family who holds power and wealth far beyond your reach. In exchange for your right to work the soil, you owe him a series of payments and services. They come whether the crops succeed or fail, whether your family flourishes or dies. The Lord doesn't care if your barn is empty or full, he wants his share, and he wants it now. First, there's the rent. This isn't like rent today, one fixed amount each month. Instead, it's often a portion of your harvest. Maybe a tenth called a tithe, sometimes more. You might owe grain, vegetables, eggs, or animals. After months of backbreaking labor, you gather your crops, only to hand over a chunk to the Lord. What's left is yours to live on, or not. Then come the taxes. The church demands a tithe too, often another tenth of your produce. The clergy claim their share is a sacred duty, but to you, it feels like another tax, another hole ripped from your already empty pockets. Refusing to pay risks excommunication, a spiritual death sentence that cuts you off from the community and eternal salvation. But it doesn't end there. Sometimes your Lord imposes special taxes, levies for war, for building projects, or for his personal needs. These unexpected demands can appear without warning, forcing you to give even more, sometimes selling tools or livestock to pay. On top of all that, there are fees and fines. Using the Lord's mill to grind grain, pay a fee. Baking bread in the village oven, pay again. Marrying, inheriting land, or even dying might require payments to the Lord or the church. Every part of your life is taxed, watched, and recorded. If you fail to pay, the consequences are severe. The Lord might seize your tools, animals, or even your home. You could be forced into servitude or imprisoned. In worse cases, eviction leaves your family homeless and desperate. Many peasants end up in a cycle of debt they cannot escape. A bad harvest, illness, or accident can ruin you financially for years. You borrow from neighbors, merchants, or moneylenders, often at high interest. Failing to repay leads to more loss and hardship. All this work you do, the backbreaking planting, tending, and harvesting, is largely for others. Your labor fills the Lord's granaries, the church's coffers, and merchants' pockets. You're left with barely enough to eat, clothe your family, and survive another day. Despite the crushing burden, peasants have little choice but to comply. The Lord's men enforce these payments with ruthless efficiency. Bailiffs and tax collectors patrol the villages, demanding what's owed. Refusal or delay risks punishment. Occasionally, peasants rebel against taxes and rents. History is full of revolts, some small, some large. But these uprisings rarely succeed. Lords respond with brutal force, crushing dissent and punishing leaders severely. The tax system also deepens social divisions. Nobles grow richer and more powerful. Peasants grow poorer and more desperate. You see the lavish life of the Lord, feasts, fine clothes, and grand halls, while you scrape by on scraps. Sometimes, peasants try to improve their lot by marrying into wealthier families or moving to towns. But these are rare chances, and many remain trapped by birth and circumstance. The constant pressure of taxes and rents shapes your entire life. It influences what crops you grow, how you manage your family, and how you plan for the future. There's little room for savings or investment. Every harvest is a gamble. You learn to budget every seed, every morsel of food, and every hour of work. Survival depends on careful planning, cooperation with neighbors, and hope that the next year won't bring disaster. At night, you dream of freedom, of owning your land, feeding your family without fear, and living without the Lord's shadow over you. But dawn always brings the same hard reality. Next, we'll look at the toll of hard labor, the endless physical toil that breaks bodies and spirits alike in the medieval peasant's world. You've made it through war, famine, plague, wild animals, brutal justice, and the never-ending burden of taxes. But the hardest enemy of all isn't a disease or a tax collector. It's the daily grind of backbreaking labor. For a medieval peasant, life is a relentless cycle of work that starts before sunrise and stretches long after sunset, with little rest and few rewards. Your body, your mind, and your spirit are worn down, day after day, season after season. From the moment you wake in your cramped, cold hut, if you sleep at all, you're greeted by the sounds of roosters, the chill of the dawn, and the endless tasks that fill your day. Your home is a humble, leaky shelter made of wood, wattle and daub, barely keeping out the cold and damp. You share it with your family, maybe animals too, crammed into a space no bigger than a modern bedroom. Your clothes are simple and worn thin from years of wear. Shoes are a luxury, many walk barefoot in the mud, risking injury and infection. Your hands are calloused, cracked, and stained from toil. The day's work begins with tending the fields. Planting, weeding, watering, and harvesting crops like barley, wheat, rye, or vegetables. You use primitive tools, a wooden plough pulled by oxen, hoes, sickles and rakes. Nothing fancy. Every inch of earth demands sweat and strength. Work isn't just seasonal, it's a constant. When you're not in the fields, you're repairing fences, tending livestock, fetching water, chopping wood, or helping build the Lord's projects. Your body is your tool, and it's pushed to the limit. Weather rarely gives mercy. You work under scorching sun, biting cold, pouring rain, or biting wind. There's no sick leave or vacation, only the chance to rest when your body simply gives out. Injuries are common. Blisters, cuts, broken bones, or worse happen often. Your medical help is scarce. You bandage wounds with cloth and hope for the best. An infection can turn a minor scrape into a death sentence. Even as you work, your stomach gnaws with hunger. Food is scarce, and every meal is a struggle. You eat simple porridge, dark bread, and whatever vegetables or meat you can afford. Protein is rare. Meat is often reserved for special occasions or the Lord's table. Fatigue sets in, but the day isn't done. After the fields, there's cooking, cleaning, childcare, and mending clothes. Women and children work alongside men, sharing the endless chores. No one escapes the grind. Your nights offer little comfort. The cold seeps through your thin walls. Rats scurry, and the sounds of the night, howling wolves, creaking trees, or groans from your neighbors, keep you on edge. Sleep is fitful and short. Over time, your body breaks down. Back pain, arthritis, and joint problems plague you. Your eyesight dims, your teeth rot, and your strength fades. Many don't live long enough to feel old. Most are worn out by their 30s or 40s. The relentless labor takes a toll on your spirit as well. Dreams of better days fade under the weight of exhaustion and despair. Joy is found in small moments, a shared meal, a child's laugh, a festival, but these are fleeting. You find solace in community and faith. The church provides rituals, hope, and occasional aid. Villagers share what little they have, helping each other survive. Still, the future looks bleak. Generations of peasants live and die in the same fields, trapped by circumstance. Change comes slowly, if at all. Your survival depends on grit, endurance, and a stubborn will to live. But the system is stacked against you, from birth to death. The medieval peasant's life is a harsh struggle for mere existence. So, why wouldn't you survive as a medieval peasant? Because every day is a battle against hunger, disease, violence, and exhaustion. Because you're trapped by laws, taxes, and poverty. Because even the land and animals you depend on can turn against you. Because the world offers little mercy or hope. Yet, despite it all, peasants endure. They till the soil, raise families, and keep communities alive. Their resilience is the backbone of history, even if their stories often go untold. This ends your brutal, immersive journey through the life of a medieval peasant. A life defined by hardship, resilience, and the raw struggle to survive.